And I always encourage folks to make sure that they have quantifiable, measurable bullet points. It's one thing to say that you increase sales. It's another thing altogether to say that you increased sales by a $500,000 in a 3-month period. That's a nugget. That's something that people will remember. And you do this for a very important reason. And that's because as people read your resumes, mm-hmm. different accomplishments are going to make them kind of go, well, that's interesting. If he did it at this company, then he already has the knowledge that he's bringing to our organization to allow him to do that or do it even better. If you, in another bullet point, talk about how you volunteered, organized, and created the company's United Appeal every year, which is a job that most people go, not me. That demonstrates to them that you're willing to go well over and above your job description for the good of the company. And my feeling is, until you have a resume that is full of quantifiable, measurable benefits, slow down. And here's the other thing. When you put quantifiable, measurable benefits on paper, you feel really good about yourself. And even more important, if a person reads your resume and they find a bullet or two that is of great importance to them, enough for them to stop and think about it, there's a very good chance they're going to ask you, how did you do it? And if you think about each bullet point as a conversation starter, that gives you an opportunity to tell a mini story about what the situation was, what the task was, what you actually did to make it happen, and what the result was. So all very important to think about as you are moving forward in your job search campaign.
Yeah, so well said. I think about those things as if you were the actual prescription to the employer's job description. And I think about that because, you look at pharmacists and the way they have to actually measure each prescription medicine that they give to people very carefully. So we think is something, all it needs is 20 pills. It's that's not that simple, because sometimes those pills and those liquids, they actually have to be measured exactly so that they give you the exact dose, and each dose counts. So not everybody's the same, because sometimes those doses are given because of somebody's weight and height, or because of somebody's ability to absorb certain medications, or whether or not that person is allergic to that medication. There's an allergy warning that's put on certain medications for particular reasons, but but for prescriptions, it's not like the over-the-counter where you're worried about taking the pills. The pharmacist is not going to make the medication unless they have the exact prescription for you, not just the general. So all that to be said, you have to be the prescription in the sense of you have to be that exact match or the right match for the employer. You have to show it, and the burden of proof is going to be on you. It won't be, the burden of proof won't be on the employer to know what. They'll know when they see it, but if they don't recognize it out of you, they won't hesitate to put you off to the side. And I'm not even saying that you can't be off a little bit. In other words, when people look at job descriptions and they see, well, they don't match 100%, so they shouldn't apply. I think there's some leeway sometimes, and There's some understanding that, hey, nobody may match 100%. So how about the ones that match 90, 80, and even 70%? How much of a margin of error is there? That might be different per employer. But all in all, you have to show that you match the best and why, and hopefully add a little, how should I say, add a little personality to it, so that people will understand and employer will understand that you understand their business needs. That's what they're going to look for. If they don't see that, they're not going to be very interested at all.
And although I guess, and Mark, you're more of an expert at this than I, that applicant tracking systems, which most of our viewers would know, is software that your resume passes through before it ever gets to a human being, and the score of it is based on how well you meet the requirements of the position. And those requirements are the keywords. Everybody's looking for magical keywords. Well, those are the magical keywords for that position. And in your cover letter, taking the time to match their requirements in the order that they have it with your abilities, using in many cases the exact same word. Like if you need a BA, there's no point saying anything other than BA, and so on and so forth as you go through it. The applicant tracking system is really going to pay attention, because it's going to go, whoa, here's somebody that scores 90% or 95% on the front end as it is passing through the system. And that's something that can bring your attention level, meaning people paying attention to your resume, very high, because you've done something that most people don't do, which is show exactly how your talents align with the requirements of the company. Because if you can't show that to software as you pass through it, you'll never get a chance to show it to a human being in most cases, unless you're fortunate enough to have someone inside that's going to carry your resume through. But it is I don't want to say automatic, but it makes you a very strong candidate very quickly in the eyes of software, then become the eyes of a human being, because you're demonstrating that you are the answer to the employer's needs, then get through the door.
And I think one of the things that we can't discount is how much ATS, the applicant tracking system, ATS, which Damian just got through talking about, is a factor, and a lot of people don't make it through. But I understand a lot of good qualified candidates don't make it through, largely because of the format and their lack of format, and their lack of pay attention to the detail that's involved in writing it. Now, don't get scared. Write your resume to a human and so that a human can see it. So you want it still to be aesthetically pleasing, but like a lot of little tricks of the past and all those myths that we've heard in the past, don't get your ATS through, but good content does. So if we're talking about the technical aspect of it, and this is the only thing I'll say, is that there are tools, and one of the better tools that you can, two tools is, one is a good word cloud software, where it will help you, will amplify the keywords of the job description. You'll put that in, you'll see that and make sure that your resume kind of matches what those keywords are from the word cloud scan. Or you can go to jobscan.co. You'll get 6 opportunities to be able to get to upload your job description and upload your resume, and to find matching keywords. You're going to get a report back, and it'll tell you where you lack and where you can emphasize certain words. And of course, all of it has to make sense. It's not the fact that the words are, but the basics are is that if you don't have enough matches for your resume, the ATS fails you. And 80% could possibly fail a lot of people. So they're looking for the highest score more than likely, and it's likely out of 100 they're choosing maybe 5 to 10, if that, out of those 100, and then everybody else gets put aside, and they're considered disqualified. So it's a little tricky, but it can get into some really crazy areas. And let me remind you, if you do have questions about solutions that you could bring to your next employer, maybe some of your challenges have been an ATS challenge or a resume challenge, feel free to put that in the chat box or in the chat so we can answer that. And that's basically your LinkedIn thread. And you can also follow both Damian and myself on LinkedIn by just going to our profile and pressing follow or connect. Damian, one of the things I think too that people get scared about is that in order to figure out what solutions you have to bring to an employer also brings up the idea of what kind of strengths you had, of the things that kind of cause or inspires results from your past employers. And I think people have a challenge of realizing or how to get to that point because they just never thought of themselves of, that I have had accomplishments, I've had results, I've made an impact. They don't think that way. So therefore, they think that they're just going to go with a bargaining chip of some sort, think that that's going to be the way that employers will decide to hire them. What's your perspective on that?
And like you, I'm often told I haven't measured anything. First thing that I recommend is that they either get copies of or pull every performance review that they've had. It's the old saying, what gets measured is what gets done. Mm-hmm. And that is an excellent place to start because you have already quantified whether you made sales or not, or creative things that you may have done to reduce shrinkage if you were in retail, like I used to be. The other thing, excuse me, is I always recommend that when they do land, that they immediately start tracking the little accomplishments that seem little but really aren't, that they do at work. Another source for quantifiable, measurable benefits is I encourage them to, if they have access to, pull all their attaboy emails, and I'll define that. That's any email that you gotten from a coworker or manager or supervisor congratulating you on whatever it was that you did that made them pause and think to recognize you. In my opinion, and it's simply mine, I would rather see a resume that has less bullet points that are meaty, quantifiable, measurable than resumes that are full of fluff. Because if you and I can see a resume that's full of fluff, you can bet that an employer can. And I was reading an article yesterday talking about human resource managers and their kind of built-in lie detector spidey sense, and in many cases can read a resume and tell whether the person is telling a tall tale or exaggerating, or at least create that feeling of doubt in the HR person's mind, when in fact, what you're really trying to do is document the good things that you've done and challenge them to ask you how you did it, because by them asking you how you accomplished a particular thing at work, it gives them the opportunity to hear and think, and if it's on Zoom or in person, see how you thought the entire process through. And by them watching you retell the story, if you will, they'll get a much better feel for you and your ability. And sometimes they'll pop you with a question. And I know this isn't interviewing, but it is talking about quantifiable, measurable benefits. Sometimes, and this happened at Google, someone was asked, how many light bulbs are there in Midtown Manhattan? And all that was, there was no right answer. It just was a thinking exercise so that the HR person could see how you think, rather than getting lobbed a crazy question like that. If you have documented your accomplishments in all the positions that you've had, you've practically eliminated the chance that you're going to get an oddball question, because you have provided them with so much information that you have done in your past that they're going to want to spend more time learning about who you are and how you did it than, hitting you with a crazy question. So it is well worth your time to go through the exercise. And here is something that I learned really the first couple of weeks in career counseling. People say, well, yeah, but how do you do it? So I'll look at a person's resume, and if the person said increase sales, I ask them to ask themselves, well, so what? Meaning, increase sales by how many dollars, by what percentage, in what amount of time? And if you go through and ask each of your bullet points the question, so what, your mind will go to work to help you quantify. And then another issue that comes up, and again, your resume is such a critical part of your personal marketing plan. People say, well, I can't remember exactly how many dollars I increase sales by. And what I tell them is, develop a formula that is believable, so that when you go into the interview, when they ask you, they're not going to care whether it was 15,000 or 14,998. Excuse me. What they're looking for is the way that you got there. And that's what they're looking for, because they're trying to think, if you were sitting in this chair where the hole is, do you have it to be able to learn quickly on your own, make decisions, and go? And your prior experience with accomplishments gives them a map showing them how you think in many cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really very detailed, and I really like that. Sona Bal has joined us. I was just on her show, a live stream show this morning. Thank you very much. She's a global HR person and a career coach as well. She adds that she loves the so what question that you asked and she says she does this with her clients. Their brain explodes when they realize they made an impact. That is exactly right. It's the idea that you're showing that you made an impact by going through that explanation. In fact, employees really want to hear strategy. They want to know kind of the antidote to how you got to that particular point. And your ability to be able to tell stories that relate to that is going to be really critical in order for an employer to see that, hey, this person knows exactly what they're doing and they feel comfortable with you explaining it. And just imagine the scenarios that you get into where people are looking at, what do you do when you're under pressure to create that? That's a whole nother set of questions that you'll answer. Although you may get one, I want to know several things: how you perform under pressure, and what do you do to galvanize results, perhaps of others, by what you do. Sunil also says impact, make more money, save time, and those things are really important. Um, Sometimes it's not even, like you said, even the number itself that you come across with results, because sometimes results is fairly relative, is because sometimes there might be, if you're in a call center, um, and let's say you do answer calls in a really good time, like that you really resolve uh, the uh, the customers or your client's concern in that call center. What they're going to ask about, what kind of time that you've taken with them might matter, because in some call centers, that taking more time is better, because then you're trying to resolve all of their needs, not just the one they call about. So if you're trying to answer the question of how to fix a wheel on a bicycle, they want to know that you can do those steps, and that it needs to be plausible, not that you've done the steps in just the amount of time. And somebody that really is an expert in that particular area is going to tell that you're faking, or that you really know what you're talking about.
Mhm. Um, and a related tool that you can utilize when you are in the middle of an interview.
Mhm.
There have been times where I have drawn a blank, just an absolute blank. And the best way to handle something like that, especially if you're going to frame your answer in a quantifiable, measurable way,
Mhm.
is to stop, look the person in the eye, smile, and say, that's a great question. I need a minute to think about that. And 99 times out of 100, at least in my experience, that's just enough time for your mind to go click and to give you the type of answer that you want to present, as opposed to just blurting something out because you got popped.
Mhm.
Another thought that I had is um, when you are uh, going through the interviewing process, knowing your resume is very important. But what's even more important is your ability to specifically relate your individual talents as requested in the job position. Because if you can speak to that and also say, well, when I was at this company, we had a similar situation, and this is what I did. You have kind of redirected the question with a response that is quantifiable, measurable benefit, as opposed to, again, fumbling. Sometimes you can get all tied up in knots when you're in the middle of an interview, but the better you know the position, the better you know your resume, and the better you know how your individual talent aligns with what they're looking for, the more effective your interview is going to be.
Absolutely. One of the things I talked about in my ebook, 421 Modern Job Search Tips for 2021, is the fact, oh, and actually I've been talking about this for years now, is that you have to have the mindset of a consultant. And what
Mm-hmm.
consultants do is very much different, very foreign to the way that most people interview. A consultant will come in and they're asking questions not just to soothe the desire and the inquiries of the person's asking. They're looking for to answer very specific problems. and they could tell you whether it's a problem that's unique to to you or to the employer or to their client or not, and what they've done with these clients and what they've done to resolve these issues with the clients. And they're going to be very numeric and quantitative in their answers, because we know that those things matter. They want to know in return for is information. Okay, how much work am I going to get into? So just imagine yourself, if you have a mindset consultant, when somebody says, "Hey, and they're expecting, what kind of things that you've achieved at this job," then they're not only expecting you to answer and say, "Hey, I've saved money here, I saved time there," but your answer needs to also be the turnaround question, and saying, "Hey, how much work is actually involved? How far are you behind?" And then if they give you that number, then you could take that to the next level by answering and say, "Hey, okay, I could see that, and you can ask them questions. This is time for you to ask questions when you're having that conversation. It's okay, how have this is what worked for me. How does this work for you?" More than likely, they're going to answer that question very directly. They're going to answer in a way that to give you intel about them. And then at that time, you can go ahead and start to explain, okay, now I can give you more idea. This is where we can start. Not that you have to spill all of the secrets that you have, although that's not always a bad thing. But you can go ahead and say, okay, but this is where I would start with this particular problem of yours. Now we're getting into the very meat and bones of what the employer needs. And the more specific you get, the more reassurance you can actually bring them by answering that question. So basically, again, you're bringing your expertise to a similar situation like the employer has, and you're providing them a solution. And then you turn around, you start to bring a conversation, a business conversation around, okay, what kind of things have happened with you guys? Then that's only going to be right for them too. Now, if they don't answer that question, you have leverage. And what I mean leverage is that this is your opportunity to say, I, I don't know, I'm not clear about your problem and what you need to position for if you're not solving this, that, and other problem, or if they're not forthcoming or even candid about their answer. That's where, and we've talked about that before, you expect candidness in these conversations. I understand that perhaps they may not give, uh, you know, the exact answer you may desire, but what you're trying to do is that you're compelling them. You bring a compelling argument that, hey, if I can't solve the problem, then I can't be the answer. And sometimes they may not be able to articulate. You can find that out too, and maybe you can run through some scenarios. So, well, if it's that, if then that and that kind of problem solving kind of strategy. But all in all, that's a consultant mindset that I've talked about over the years. Is that you want to bring a kind of conversation that right in such a way that right then that you're starting to solve some of their problems, but the only way they'll get the true answer if they hire you. Thoughts on
And
that, Damian?
sure, when you are getting ready for an interview, it makes sense to do a competitive analysis from the standpoint of knowing what the competition is doing, and if you can make it even better, what your direct competitor in your position is doing. I am absolutely convinced that I got hired and relocated down here to North Carolina for a number of reasons, but what won the president of the company over is he pointed to a clock on his wall, and he was really proud about it. And then he said, "Well, what do you think?" And I went on and talked about the vendor, my relationship, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, just out of curiosity, how much are you selling that for? And he said, $29.99. And I said, well, that's really interesting. I mean, I know you're in startup mode, but I know the vendor, I know the company, and right now I'm selling a three-piece set. The clock was a frying pan. I'm selling a three-piece set of theirs for $19.99. And I know you didn't ask me this, but I feel that you're getting overcharged every time you purchase any of their product. And if I had the opportunity to be here because I work with their national people, we could fix that. And he was shocked that someone interviewing would be so direct. But, he asked me a direct question, and I felt I had nothing to lose. And my attitude I wasn't being smart about it. I was just saying, hey, I think you're getting overcharged every time you purchase anything from this vendor, and I can help you improve your margin, reduce the price, and increase sales. Boom, boom, boom. And, I got home, and less than 2-3 days later, I got a call from the president who gave me the offer for the position. So my point in this whole thing is you can take your interviewing one step farther by doing a competitive analysis so that if you do get asked, you'll have a feel for it. And I know that not every position, that you can't do this for every position, but the more knowledge that you have of the market going into the interview, the more persuasive you're going to be, because you can say, well, your company is doing it A, but to get ready for this interview, I looked at companies B, C, D, and E. And if you are interested, I can tell you how they're doing business, because it's very different from how you're doing business. And you've done a number of things there. You've educated them. You've been frank with them. You've given them the opportunity to see how you think. And it adds a whole different dimension to what 99% of your other competition, other candidates are going to bring, because you took the time to over prepare for this interview.
There is an over preparedness that needs to take place. And we're talking about not just a few minutes just to see what's on their website and how to answer a couple of questions about them. We're talking about taking hours and hours of time, researching one company, or even if you need to, research several companies and look and contrast and compare what their needs are compared to each other. They know even the details of how they compare more than likely to their competition. But what they don't know is that inside information, the how they got to that point information. If you knew that, then you can expect, if you're not getting candor from the interviewer, then you're allowed to turn around. I think it's appropriate and say, I said, how come that you ask them, how come you're not doing blah, 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 blah. Damian approached it one way, in the sense that he says, I could tell you that you're getting gypped.
Yeah, exactly right.
You want and that will be kind of a blow, but you want to approach it this way and say, well, and he was solution oriented. He says, if I was here, I can show you how they did it and how you can get to that point too. And that could be a major, would you be interested in asking him, well, would you be interested in knowing that? Has that been a pain point, a certain point for you? If they say, yes, that would be a great deal, then you can take the conversation a little bit further. You still have to be mindful that you are still auditioning. And
Yes.
that this is where you get a little savvy, but at the same time, you understand that you're also interviewing them too. Even
Hmm.
if you're bringing the solution aspect to it, you're also seeing if they're going to be a right fit to you. Now, they start to be secretive and off-putting and all that. There's something wrong with not having a forthright answer in those particular situations. But you have to know the company enough. You have to know what their business needs are as it relates to your position. If you are talking about something that's unrelated to that department that you're being hired for, it better either be really close related, or you need to interview for that position, or otherwise you won't be considered despite how you do, because again, you're trying to meet that specific need. It's sort of if somebody's hungry, but you give them a glass of water, the glass of water is needed, but what they really wanted was food. And that's you have to have that kind of mindset and that kind of open-minded and that kind of tenacity enough to be specific in your research, that you're researching that company and how you can make what their needs are better for what they're through what you're actually interviewing for. So I think that's where a lot of people get lost, because when you say target a company and start to target needs, they'll say okay, but they'll wonder where do they need to go from here. Well, you've got to be able to look at the positions and to be able to look at the positions and find out, okay, what is their problem? And if you can't define that problem when you go to the interview, you are going to be shooting in the dark. Um, you have to know. You have to know what is sort of like hunting. You have to know what lures that particular species in order for you to target that particular species. Uh, you won't be able to find the bears with a worm. That's for sure. So so that's how that's how specific you have to be. Any more thoughts on that, Damien?
Um, I'd like to expand on what you said about
Hmm.
how important it is for you to interview the interviewer.
Hmm.
And one of the advantages of in-person interviewing, even if it's for the second or the third, it gives you an opportunity to see their physical surroundings. I mean, are they in a great looking office park, or are they in a ramshackle building? Um, it allows you to make observations when you are walking through. Is it freshly painted and well lit, or is it dark and full of stuff people have brought from home to make it, so that they can work? As you're walking through, are people laughing and joking, still working, but a very cordial atmosphere, or is it dead silence? And I was never so shocked as when I walked into my old company, that when I left, it's team atmosphere, one for all for one. And, there was lots of laughter and chatter and what have you. When I went back
Hmm.
again as an outplacement counselor, it was absolute dead silence.
Hmm.
And you could visibly feel the tension crackling in the air. And with me just being in the building, I could feel myself you know getting tense. And my point in this whole thing is, follow your intuition. If you can have a great interview and walk out and kind of go, there's something that just doesn't feel right. Follow your intuition, because I'm here to tell you that every time that I have gone against my intuition, it has been a spectacular failure.
Hmm.
Um, so, point being, yes, you work very hard to get a job interview, and yes, you need to go back to work, and I understand that. But if you go against your intuition, May not be right away. It may be 6 months. In my case, I made it to a year, and then my boss changed, and I went from being on high to being, the person that everybody was trying to get out the door. So again, as Mark is saying, you have as much right to gather as much information as you can before and during the interview as they do trying to pull information from you that in a good interview you volunteer freely and it's a conversation, not an interrogation.
Yeah, yeah, and that's really key, isn't it? Having that conversation. Really, a lot of the tone of the conversation is going to be contingent on, and that's intel, whether you want to work for a company like that. Some people will try to think that they'll be able to push through, and despite of what the company culture actually is. And I think a good question is, it, and to discern if you are really targeting a company, you want to try to find out what kind of uh, failure, past failure rate is for the climate of the company. In other words, a good question, I think, as often as the bottom line is the company, are people happy because of the leadership, or are people happy in spite of the relation of their relationship with the boss? That makes all the difference of the world. So when they're telling you their accomplishments and you can sense the misery that they're under, then you know that it's not going to be a fit if you think that way. Of course, if you don't think that way, then in something you can say even and challenging. So, a lot of the way that we got to where we are because we really did care about each other, and we really were, and this is the way we are. Now, when some people say, so we're a family here, it could mean that they're a family, but that doesn't mean they're not a dysfunctional family. Who wants to be a part of a dysfunctional family? And there needs to be some kind of levity and some kind of proof along the way when you walk in the doors that said there is a family there. But you got to ask yourself, what's the driving point behind this particular culture? It might
Mhm.
be it might be the fact that that person that's interviewing, that's hiring, they got a great leader instead. Now, sometimes a great leader can sense that the person that they're leading is not particularly adequate, and you might get a chance. There, you might need to shift your solutions to that leader's leader.
Mhm.
I know we're getting to something a little bit more advanced, but sometimes you've got to, if this guy isn't doing, you make it to the next guy, and you realize this is the person that's responsible for the laughter out there. Then you not only need to shift your energies, especially in that moment. And I don't mean overstepping that particular boss, but then you got to start to shift your energies, realizing that that's the person that drives that particular culture. And maybe there might be some quick thinking you need to make them to make a great impression on that particular boss, because obviously that person has the last to say. They're going to value you a little bit more because you recognize that. And sometimes excuse me, you got to ask a few audacious questions in order to get there. And you've got to be a little bit bolder in the ask. Sometimes even just to ask, and I've said that this in previous casts that, hey, can we take a walk around? I like to be able to look around. Although now virtually, we're not particularly able to take that walk. We're not able to take that stroll through the department, but maybe there might be a chance to talk to people who are in that department directly through a Zoom meeting. Say maybe before I take this job, say, is it possible that I can meet a couple of people on staff and ask them some questions? That's audacious. It can be done,
Mhm.
and I've seen it being done. I had somebody in the job lab a couple of years ago. I said, you'd probably get more of a promotion if or to get the job, which was a promotion if that they actually did get. But I said, if you could talk to the person that's leading that person, if you're suspect of them, then that's the person that you're going to always want to kind of round back every now and then and to tell them how you're doing. And that's going to make a difference. Not only that work, that they were promoted in that person's position eventually. So, all that intel says you got to be able to respond to the data that you have in front of you. That's the only way you'll be able to do that. And data isn't always numbers either. It's your ability to be able to take the information you're given and give a response to that makes yourself more attractive to that employer, to that person that's interviewing you.
And if I could go back to Intel, before your interview, it would make a lot of sense, I mean, if you're in the same city, to take a drive and find out how long it's going to take you so that you're not late for your interview, but also to just pull in and watch people as they come out of the building at night and see what type of clothes they're wearing. Are they happy or are they downtrodden? Is everybody going home like 5:30, 6 o'clock, or do you go back like I did at 7, 8 o'clock and the parking lot is completely full? I mean, that tells you a lot about what the workload is for everybody involved. And you might see these things, again, going back to where I used to work, where when I was there, everybody would go out, they'd be laughing and kidding. The one time I observed them through the rearview mirror, I parked so I could see them. People were coming out stooped over from having, constantly do so much work, and you could physically see the stress that they were under. And that was a strong communicator to me. And here's the point. You're gathering this intelligence before you actually interview. And I remember asking during the interview, what's the work day look like here? And the person said, we have an hour for lunch. We start at 9 o'clock. We're usually done at 5. And then I thought to myself, that's interesting. Then why is the parking lot full at 7 and 8 o'clock at night if you're working, 9 to 5? Again, just intelligence. It may or may not impact your final decision. But Mark, I think what you've been saying through this entire process is that you, the job seeker or the job interviewer, have a modicum of control when you go into interview, and that the interview is not 100% on the person that is interviewing you, that you, as an effective interviewer, have a responsibility to have already gotten as much research as possible so that you can respond correctly, but more importantly, ask those difficult questions so that you can get answers. And, they may fluff you, but they'll remember that you took the time to do all sorts of research and you weren't afraid to ask the tough questions. Those are things that you can add to your interviewing toolbox that can make you stand above everybody else.
And you should be able to expect certain solutions from them to understand how they get to, because there are times too when an employer isn't all completely ethical themselves, and you want to know about if that's something you value. Is their ethics, the company's ethics. That's one way to match values, how forthcoming, how honest they are. Now, again, going back to the in spite of, some of that could be trail back to all kinds of things. It could be that one boss, or it could be the whole company's that way. In other words, and to be able to discern in a very savvy way, if you are the one, is that the kind of boss? And you kind of ask yourself, when they're trying to get solutions or trying to get results from uh, their people, are they the kind that is the puppet, or they're kind of the technician in a sense, that they need their boss in order to function in their job, or do they have autonomy, that they're a trusted boss, that they're a trusted leader, and that they're able to make decisions on their own, and that they're trusted, they have that kind of judgment. That tells you a lot about who and what kind of person you look for. This is important because when they're giving you, say, this is how we get our solutions, this, that, and the other, that means that they're being controlled by something else.
Mhm.
That's how they do. So you can almost expect, if you decide to work for somebody like that, there's two ways you can let. One is that you may think, well, I can manipulate this person to do because they're being controlled by something else. Or you said, man, I feel really confident because this person has something I want, and that is that they're going to show me great leadership, and I feel comfortable with that. That says a lot. So it's not just it's not just the solutions that you're bringing. And I think that if you go to interview, list 3 to 5 things that you bring with quantitative and qualitative measurements or expectations, and tell why and have stories to back that up, you can have a very powerful arsenal in order for you to say, hey, I want this job or I don't want this job based on these particular facts. But also, you got to look, you got to have 3 to 5 things of what you want out of that employer. And they can only meet 1 or 2 of those things. You got to ask yourself if you really want that job. And I think that's where it's so different now than back in the day, because you have access to, if you don't know anybody in that company, you can get to know 3 to 5 people who could possibly refer you and have a relationship with you as you go into interview. And that can make a major difference in the
Mhm.
results of your interview, or give you a major amount of information for you to decide not to take the position. But both ways you should know, based on the types of the types of solutions you bring, but also the expecting how they resolve and get results from their end as well. Any last words for you as we begin to close out on this particular hour?
No, I think what you said is excellent and it is right on point. And as always, this is the highlight of my week. And I appreciate the opportunity to spend time with you and with all of our viewers. And I look forward to next week. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. I owe you some time. So when we get off the line here, hold on a second. We could work that out. But for the rest of you, thank you very much for joining us here, Modern Job Search Checklist. My name is Mark Anthony Dyson. Again, you can find me at thevoiceofjobs.com. Damian Birkel, you can find him at jobsearching.org, just the way it sounds. In the meantime, thank you very much. Join us here next Friday as we bring you some more help. And thank you, Sonal, for joining us here. And actually, you stayed for the whole conversation. Really awesome. Uh, Thank you all very much. And you guys have a great day.